Hello and welcome to Rooted in Faith, the podcast of the Adventist Educators Blog, where we explore how faith, research, and teaching come together to inspire meaningful learning. I'm your host, Suellen Timm, and today we're delighted to welcome Yanina Jimenez, a multigrade teacher in Illinois, Ph.D. candidate in education, and author of the book Brain Friendly Teacher. You can find the link of her book in the description of this episode. Yanina is also the author of several excellent and creative articles published in the Adventist Educators Blog, where she shares insights that blend neuroscience, education, and faith in truly inspiring ways. Yanina, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure for me too.
Well, we were talking that you are studying neuroscience and applied to Adventist education. That sounds a lot scientific, and sometimes it could, someone that's listening us could think it's too scientific. This cannot apply to the real reality of a classroom. But we know that that's different, right? Why should teachers know about the brain and how to address this in their classroom?
Well, the brain is the organ that we use for learning. And as teachers, we want learning to be lasting. And now, because of brain science and the imaging that is emerging and all these new things that are coming up are telling us how our students learn best. We know that students learn whatever we do, but there are ways where students can learn best. And that is what neuroscience tells us. So it is a fascinating field.
Yeah, and well, let's move to something very practical, talking about neuroscience. Could you share some tips for brain-friendly classroom design? How can we use the structure of our classroom also to help students learn better?
Yes, that is one of the findings of brain science, which is that the classroom, otherwise known as the learning space, has power. It can impact students positively or negatively, depending on how we use it. We are not talking about just decoration, we are talking about the function, the design of the learning space, which is not the classroom, my kingdom. It is the classroom, our students' learning space. And for that, I have a few tips for the ones who are listening. And we are not talking again decor. Decor has its place, but it is not the priority. The classroom is where students spend 7 hours a day. So it is thought of the teacher, a second teacher. We are the first teacher. The classroom is the second teacher. It sends a message even when we are not in it. So we have to think about the flow from one place to another. How do our students get from point A to point B, from B to C, and to C to A? There has to be hallways where if we want our students to be from a collaborative space to a space where they can work by themselves. How do they get there? It has to be really well laid out. And also in the classroom, flexible seating or not, because if we don't have the means, so we are not prone to do flexible seating, totally alternative seating where students have different types of seating, it's okay. But as long as we have movement and we allow students to move while learning, Ellen G. White says that students should move while learning. It is not just moving, learning, we stopped, and then moving again as a brain break, which is fine and great. But while learning, students can move. Maybe they can be standing on a standing desk. Maybe they can be on a wiggly chair. They can be moving their feet. They can be on their stomach working or lying on their backs, as long as we provide alternative seating, because sitting 7 hours is not good for a child. It's not good for adults, but much less for a child. Another thing is, let's play with colors. If we have, for example, 4 walls, one wall can be for bright colors, the makerspace, to invite creativity, to invite risks and engagement, and we can put bright posters like pink, orange, yellow. All those colors look alert our brains. But that doesn't mean that we have to put all of those colors around all the walls. Then on another wall, we can leave it empty because our brains will look for that empty space, will look for that empty time. And blank spaces need to be in everything, not just the space, but on worksheets, on time, on instruction, on slides, on everything. There has to be a blank space in time and in space. Another thing, and for the wall that is empty, it can be with softer colors for more neutral colors. And not because of that, we have to put the whole classroom neutral. So we need to play and take advantage of the psychology of color. Another thing is the posters in the classroom design need to be put on eye level. And if we can help it without lamination, so the glare is not there for our students. Another thing is let's add a makerspace. Maybe if we don't have a huge makerspace, we can have a table, a corner, a box where we leave students things where they can bring the abstract to the concrete, the lessons we teach to a place where they can manipulate their learning and make things with their hands. That is called embodied cognition. The hands need the cognition functions, the cognitive functions, and cognition needs hands. And God made it that way because it complements each other. I have a few more. Please make sure that you declutter your space once in a while. If you see things that you don't need, take them out. I know it hurts sometimes. We think, oh, we might use it later. But remember this principle: declutter, declutter, declutter. Another thing is bring nature to the classroom. That is what God made for our brains, and we need to take advantage of that. The colors are great, the textures. It's better to, if you're going to use manipulatives, use wooden ones instead of plastic if you can help it. And also, if you have a space outside, bring your students outside. And remember that brain principles are principles. They will look different than they look for me. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, whatever you have or don't have, make these principles apply to you. It is not something that it has to be done this way, but these are the broad principles that we can apply in the classroom so we can benefit and affect learning in a positive way.
Wonderful. You were talking about how it's important to have the classroom a wonderful space, and I just want to point out because Yanina is the author of several articles that we publish in the blog. I already mentioned that, but one of your articles you put a picture of that classroom, and I remember when we received it. It was not just me, but all the editors were commenting, what a wonderful classroom, because that's so cute. You have spaces where you sit in the ball. I think you had like bunk beds or something like that
Mhm.
where kids could lay down. And that's really, at the moment, my impression was, I want to be her student. I want to be in this classroom. It's so fun. It seems like fun, like what we expect from learning, right? It needs to be fun for the students as well. But mentioning about that, do you have suggestions? Because that could look expensive. Sometimes teachers, we're talking of realities all over the world. And some places I know the budget is really low. We're talking of small schools, not much students, and the teacher could say, okay, that's wonderful in a reality where you have a budget. But my reality, the problem is the money. Do you have alternatives that you can do to make that space really attractive? I know paint, for example, is not it's not expensive. That's really cheap. But we're talking about sitting spots. Do you have ideas that or tips to share?
Yes, and this is a tip for everyone who wants to bring change for their schools. If you want to bring change, do things that are free first. Make them work first, and then you can ask for a little bit of money. So, the things that you can do first that are totally free is that if you have a classroom with columns and rows, which is okay, have your students sit under the desk with a clipboard or go to a corner and lie on their backs. Or if you have a board, tell them you can work on the board. You don't have to work on your book. So they are standing up. And also, if you have rows and desks, you can put them in in clusters. You can do all types of clusters so they are fun for the kids, and sometimes a change in scenery helps them to think, oh, this is different. They learn even better. So there are ways that you can do for free first. If you have a little bit of budget, I would say get a tall desk or something that is tall, and you have your students work by that place so they can work standing up. So those are the free and close to nothing options that you can start doing so your students can move while you're learning.
Wonderful. And you mentioned about changing stuff in the classroom as well. That grabs their attention, right? Because
Yes,
you see the environment every day the same way, and something new comes up. That's wonderful. Wonderful.
yes,
Well, talking about emotions and how we can deal with changes and colors and that kind of stuff, emotions are central in learning. When students they feel safe, valued, and connected, their brains are more open to learning. So, let's talk about emotion atmosphere. What makes
yes.
the classroom atmosphere a brain-friendly spot?
Yes, these are the invisible work that we need to do as teachers. We talked about the design, the decoration, the layout, and all the things that we can see that our students are going to see. But these are things that students don't see, but they feel. And it is an invisible work. For example, the way you put even your classroom decoration, if you put them in clusters where they can work together, that sends a message. Oh, I can work with someone else. I can work with my friends. I can work in a group. Of course, depending on what you want the work for to be for. For example, if you want your students to be alone, it is okay. But you can have a place where they can meet. They can have a table and they can meet. And when they come in, we say, oh, that group work is welcomed. Another thing is if you put a poster and you put all the emotions that your students have, and they can come and point at the emotions. So you say, you see a child pointing at an angry face, you say, oh, okay, that child maybe had a problem at home and he's upset, he's sad, he's anxious, he's nervous, he's sleepy, he's hungry. And that gives you information so you can be more sensitive. Another thing is to make sure you have trauma informed practices, that you know how to deal with trauma. This is for a whole nother conversation, but we can see how we can serve our students when they have emotions, big emotions, and they can't focus. So we need to be able to take care of that too. Also, the power of we. When we teachers are about to learn or teach something, let's say we are going to learn this instead of you are going to learn this. We
Wonderful.
are going to talk about manatees. We are going to see how animals adapt in a different environment. And that creates a sense of enthusiasm when the teachers also is enthusiastic about what we are going to teach. Also, language matters, the way we refer to assignments. Instead of saying, let's open page 54 on this textbook, you can say, on page 54, you are going to find an opportunity to practice this skill so you can master it in a few days. In this page, we're going to review what we did so we don't forget it. So always add meaning to the task so it doesn't seem like busy work, but it shows that we are loving and celebrating learning. Another thing is add humor to your lessons. If you have morning meetings and you're going to talk about animal adaptations, do funny jokes, phrases about those animals. And another thing is open those windows. We can see air, but we do enjoy the benefits of having clear air in the classroom flowing again through our classroom. Silence. Not every time or not every single moment we have to be singing on or clapping or doing engaging things. Sometimes our students do need silence because that is when they can get creative. They can engage in deep thought. Also, nonverbal communication. We teachers, without talking, can send a message. Like I was saying before, eye level on posters, it is the same thing when we talk to our little students, if we are talking about elementary students, to go to eye level and talk to them. Sometimes they don't look back to us because they are shy, but they see that we are not talking top down, we are talking at their level, and we are being sensitive and loving. Also, in your classroom library, for example, provide mirrors where students can see themselves. If you have people from different parts of the world, make sure you have those books that represent them in their classroom library, and also windows, cultures that you don't have represented in your classroom, have them there so they can see something in people that they don't get to see often. And another thing is called hallway, when people come and talk about their own culture, so they have a place where they can talk among themselves. So it is the concept of mirror, windows, and hallways. And a few more habits and rituals. We all have to go outside and line up. Instead of just lining up, do it. That is a habit. But add a ritual. Do we go singing? Do we go like robots? Do we pretending we are flying? Do we pretend that we are playing trumpets? Add fun things to habits and make it unique so they know, oh, in my classroom we do this. It's different from another classroom. That is very unique of us. And this teacher takes time to make me feel special. I am not just another student in this school. We are special. The other thing is give choice as much as you can. Get to know your students before they come to your classroom. This is how you create anticipation, which is as engaging as the thing going on itself. For example, if we go on a trip, the thought about going on a trip is as much fun as being in that trip. So make the same thing for your school, for your class. Send a letter home, or even if school started, you can still do it now, and do an inventory of what your child likes, how they learn best, what they would love to be when they grow up. So you can put those things in your teaching, in your slides, in your assignments, and they feel special, they feel seen, and that makes a whole difference. A few other things: embrace mistakes. We have a chant in our classroom that says, we make mistakes, we start again. So the child comes without fear. That mistake is part of learning. Drill that in them, because children are afraid of making mistakes. The other thing is, do everything with a sense of awe. We're learning about, again, animal adaptations. Oh, did you know that this animal can do this? Do it with a sense of awe, even though you have taught that for 15 times already in your life, but do it as if you're just learning it, because that is a mirror. That is another concept, mirror neurons. If we are happy about it, it is contagious. If we are saying, okay, this is what we are learning today, that is the same thing that they are going to get. And if they learn it with enthusiasm, it sticks better in their brains. And last one for now is brain breaks. Every time you learn something and it is hard, please give a break, because brain breaks are not only to rest and not only good to do that, they are good also for a prerequisite of learning. So there has to be frequent brain breaks, and that is another invisible thing that you can do so your students have a meaningful and lasting learning experience. It is what we want as teachers.
Wonderful, wonderful. Excellent tips, and impressive how we need to think also not just of how the student learns, but also how the student needs to rest his mind. This is amazing, because sometimes as teachers, we tend to put a lot of overload. We want to teach them the more that we can in a few hours. But resting is also important. That's wonderful, wonderful. So let's move to instruction itself. What are some brain friendly teaching strategies that we can use in the classroom?
Yes, the science of learning tells us that for lasting learning, for true learning to happen, it has to be three things. One is encoding. How do students have that first encounter with new or repeated learning? Second is consolidation. How do our students make sense of what we are teaching? How are they connecting that to new and previous learning experiences? And retrieval, what are our students showing us? The visible learning, what do we see so we know they learned it or not? Because we can teach all day, but we know what we learn when they get it out of their minds. And for that, there are these 3 strategies have instructional strategies inside of them. So I am going to say several strategies per element of the science of learning.
Okay.
The first one is encoding, which is instruction, how or instruction or not, but what is their first encounter with the new material or the new learning, the new lesson, the new unit. These are some strategies that you can do. First is lecture. You can get up and give direct instruction. Sometimes it has a bad reputation, but if you make it fun, engaging, it's fine. You can use direct instruction and lectures. It's fine. But there are other ways. And it is good to have a varied instructional strategies toolbox so we can use different things, because again, novelty makes learning stick better. Too much novelty, though, comes in the way of learning, but novelty once in a while, it's good for our students. So you can do direct instruction, you can present clips at the beginning of the lesson, podcast. They can read from a textbook. Instead of listening to you, you can present slides, bring guest speakers. You can go on a field trip and learn that way. You can do flipped classrooms, have students do inquiry by themselves, learning centers, multisensory experiences. If you're going to write about a narrative, take them outside so they can use their 5 senses and write everything that they got from each sense. 5 things they heard, 5 things they touched, 5 things they smelled, and then the next day or later they come and write it. So if they collect sensory experiences, the brain can retrieve more. So that is a huge one. As many senses as you can is better to encode learning. Do games. You can start with a game. You can do dual coding. You present words, text with pictures, and that encodes the information even better. Class discussion. You can start by talking things. There is a instruction strategy that is called instructional conversations, when you let the children speak, and as they speak, they make sense of it. It is not a chatty classroom. You can say, today you're going to talk about this, and try to make sense among yourselves. That is a good strategy, even though it looks like a chatty classroom, but it is a good thing. Then you can start with a story. You can start playing something. And the next one, that is instruction or encoding. The first time the students encounter information. The second part of the science of learning cycle is consolidation, where your students practice, and they can practice on their textbooks. There is nothing wrong about it, but you can also do think, pair, share, hexagonal thinking. You provide hexagons to your students on paper, and they connect it as you talk to them, and they make webs according to how they are understanding what you're teaching. And then they can glue those hexagons and make different web designs. Later, they can compare with another student. Oh, what is your web design? And they all look different, but it is the same learning, and you can see that. That is called visible learning. And do strategies like that so you see what they are understanding. Flashcards, escape rooms, simulations. If you are talking about clouds, what I did was I created like an airport, and they had to come and check in and go inside the airplane. And inside the airplane, we learned about clouds. You can do peer testing, graphic organizers, vocabulary games, group work, different types of things on sticky notes, and also self-assessment. So those are the things that you can do to consolidate learning. And the last element that has to happen, that sometimes we forget with students, we teach, we let them practice, and then we go and teach again something else. No, we need to let them retrieve. What they retrieve is what they learn. It's not what we teach, it is what they retrieve. And you can retrieve again with tests. There is nothing wrong with verbal tests or written tests, but there are other ways to retrieve information. Exit tickets, reflections, doodling, journaling, learning logs, where they write a reflection of what they have learned, or peer instruction, where they teach that concepts to someone else. That's the best way. one of the best ways. Presentations, living museums where they internalize that character and they pretend that they are that person or that concept. Infographics, they can create songs, kids, essays, STEM projects, nature projects, and oral presentations. And before we go to the next step, and this is more about instruction, there are a few things to consider. We talked about brain breaks and the importance of rest because rest is a requisite for learning. Cognitive load. We have to make sure that we don't load our students cognitively because the brain is a muscle. We don't go to the gym and lift up the weights and have them lifted up for 9 hours. We don't do that. We lift them up, we rest. We lift them up, we rest. And the more we rest, the more strength we gain to lift even more. And that is cognitive risk. So if you get away from cognitive load, you can do more cognitive risk. If we do a lot of cognitive load, our students don't make risks. And that is sad because learning is about going deeper. So that's why we can't do a lot of cognitive load. Metacognition is when you let your students think about their thinking, learn about their learning. When you teach also, do it out loud so you can talk about mistakes. If you're doing long division, oh, I put this number here, I shouldn't put it here. You talk out loud because we teachers suffer from the curse of knowledge. We have taught something so many times that we forget the gaps. But if you do it out loud, step by step, you avoid having gaps. Always make it relevant. Say the why of each lesson that you are teaching. And remember that less is more. And lastly, try to connect every lesson you have to something else. You don't have to connect it to a million things, but today's lesson, you can connect it to nature, another lesson to movement, another one to songs, stories, Bible stories, personal life, current events. If you connect a lesson to something else, it better sticks into your students' brains.
Wonderful. You were mentioning several tips, Yanina, and this is a wonderful podcast. Maybe teachers could go back and take some notes and also check Yanina's articles on the blog because there you can find several of these topics that we are mentioning here. But something that always stands out for me is how you put the student as the center of the process of learning. And sometimes as teachers, we tend to think that we are in charge of all the process, but these tips that you're giving, they are centered in the student, correct?
Yes, and in as we always talked in your blog, it on faith too, because our God wants our students to be thinkers, to choose Him, to be cognitively alert, to choose Him, and this is where neuroscience and faith can work together, because neuroscience explains how God designs the brain to learn because He wants us to learn. He wants our students to have great learning experiences because He made our brains and He made thinking. That's what I tell my students all the time. Thinking is a beautiful thing, it is a gift from God. And we can't do it as something that we have to do. We get to think, we get to do these cognitive fun things. And that is what neuroscience does. But then faith reminds us how and why we learn. We learn to get wisdom, to get to know Jesus, to connect with the Holy Spirit, to use our high order thinking skills to do that. So we need teachers to recognize both the science of learning and also faith. And that creates a beautiful thing described in one of Ellen G. White quotes, which is we want our students to be thinkers and not mere reflectors. So when we study about the brain, we help our students to be thinkers. And the framework that I talked to you about, it's all about lasting learning. And if I can end with a bonus
Yes,
element,
please, please. Oh, just one thing before we go there is
yes,
you mentioned before about how the student and the teacher have separate roles in learning. How much is part of the student and how much is part of the teacher in this process?
yes, that goes back to the retrieval. And the one who does the talking, the one who gets things out of their minds, does the learning. So a good percentage, which is not always the case and is not always possible, but for the most part, students should talk for 80% and teachers the 20, because the more students talk and get things out, that is what they learn. Learning is what is left. It's not what teachers say. It's
Yeah.
not what we teach. So we can teach 100% and the student learns zero. But if we talk and let our students retrieve that information, that is what we know they have learned, if they have learned it or not. So the more they talk, the more they do, the more they get out of their brains, the better. So it will be nice if they can do 80% of the work and we do 20% of the work.
That's wonderful. Just a quick note about that, because sometimes teachers could be listening to this podcast and thinking, that's too much work for me. I don't have the time. I don't have the experience. I cannot put something else to my busy schedule. But you see that these tips are to make the student the part of the process. Most of the part
Yes.
of the learning is with him and not with teachers.
And
So
they like doing that work. They like
yeah,
being
yeah.
engaged, yes, and being
Yeah.
in control of their learning. We know what is best for them, what we need to teach them, but we need to let them work, play, manipulate their learning as
They
much
do
as we
this
can.
as natural. We're talking of new generations that use technology 100% of the time that they're awake. And some of the students that teachers here teach are students and generations that have their cell phone constantly with them. So we are talking that we need to be put them in center of the process, because just hearing is not enough for this generation, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Wonderful. So you have a story to share. I want to hear it.
Yes, thank you. We have said in this podcast, and that's what I always say according to what I have studied and researched. So I say that to make learning lasting and meaningful, we need the classroom design, the atmosphere, the instruction. But I like to add another element, and that is explained with a story. I found out about this like 10 years before, and I made it a theory. It could be true, it could not be true, but I am going to share with you. One
Wonderful.
day I had to step out of the classroom to go to a professional development meeting, and I left with my students a sheet saying, describe your teacher because your teacher went missing. So I go to this event, and when I come back the next day, I was so excited about seeing what my students wrote. I was sure that they were going to say, she provides the most fun seating options. She does these cool things so I can learn and I can remember things. She always tells jokes about fractions if we are studying fractions. And even though I did see a few of those, what I saw the most was something that I would never have imagined. Most of them write, my teacher smiles and likes apple pie. So I am not throwing away everything that brain science says. What I'm saying is that we teachers are the first element. If we portray Jesus, and if we are not perfect, but if we try to portray Jesus and show love to our students and we smile, and our attitude is an attitude that our students are going to like learning because of us, the teacher in this framework that I always say, classroom design, classroom atmosphere, instruction, the teacher is the first thing that they see and the first encounter that they have before all these things. So my message to you is, you are important more than anything else. Instruction, brain science is important, but that comes next. You are the one who can inspire children to love and celebrate learning first.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing this, Yanina. Such a meaningful perspective, because we are teachers that are constantly trying to put a relationship with our students, right? Put them, see them as humans. And this puts us as well as teachers in a human perspective where they want to have a relationship also with us. Thank you, Dr. Yanina, for almost doctor, right? You're finishing your PhD. And
Not yet.
but almost
Almost
in the
there.
process, a candidate
Yes.
already. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing your insights. I know you have been working really hard in your PhD to learn more about the process. I just have a last question as a curiosity. What changed your teaching from your research in neuroscience to now? What do you say, like one point that you think was the biggest finding of your PhD until now?
Yes. And it is something that I haven't noticed, but people tell me that they say, "Oh, that's different." They always tell me that when they visit my classroom, and that they see children doing all the talking, and it is not a loud classroom. They are talking to themselves, talking to their classmates. They move from here. They are engaged in their learning. I teach first through fourth. These are little kids, and they know where to look for things, and they know how to embrace mistakes, and they are really engaged in their learning. They are not waiting for me to say, this is what you do next, or this is how you encounter a problem, how you solve this. I am there to help them always, but what they see is a lot of independency where they are in charge of their learning, or they give me ideas. One child today said, I think I need to do this in a different way, and it wasn't my way, and I'm all for it. So that is the biggest change that I made, because people have noticed that in my classroom. So that's why I can tell you that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for so much for sharing. Your insights are amazing and practical wisdom with us today. I believe teachers here after this podcast will be inspired to put all our students, our kids, as the center of the process. Thank you very much for being and taking your time to be with us today. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on Rooted in Faith. We hope today's episode inspires you to see your classroom as a wonderful place to grow intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode. Until next time, stay rooted in faith and inspired in your teaching.